If you survived part 1 and you're back for more Amara and Kai chaos, do one thing for this channel before we continue. Tap subscribe and turn on the bell for more dark, emotional mafia romances like this. That's how you tell YouTube you actually want the next part. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens after she wakes up in his penthouse. She thought choosing love was the hard part. She had no idea that was just the beginning. Amara woke up to sunlight slicing through floor-to-ceiling windows, and for 3 disorienting seconds, she forgot where she was. The sheets beneath her were too soft, the kind of expensive cotton she'd only ever touched in stores when no one was watching. The air smelled like cologne and something clean and masculine, nothing like the grease and burnt coffee that usually clung to her hair after closing shifts. The silence was wrong. No clattering dishes, no Manny yelling orders from the kitchen, no drunk regulars banging on the glass, begging for one last refill, sweetheart. Just quiet, the kind of quiet that only existed in places so high and rich the rest of the world sounded like a rumor. Then last night hit her chest like a speeding truck. Kai's confession, his hands on her face, his voice breaking when he told her he loved her. The way she'd said yes, even while every rational part of her brain had screamed, run. She'd chosen him, chosen this, chosen to walk out of the diner and step into the world of the most feared man in the city. Her eyes snapped open fully, and she turned her head, expecting to see him beside her. The bed was empty. The pillow next to her was cool, untouched, like he'd never laid down at all. Panic clawed up her throat before she could stop it. Had he changed his mind? Had the daylight sobered him up and made him realize she wasn't worth the risk? Was this how it ended? Waking up alone in a stranger's bed wearing his t-shirt with nowhere to go and no way to rewind the choice she'd made? She sat up fast, heart pounding, and forced herself to really look at the room. The bedroom alone was 3 times the size of her entire apartment. Everything was pristine and expensive and perfectly arranged, like a photo in a glossy magazine. There were no photos on the nightstand, no half-finished books, no hoodie tossed over a chair, nothing personal. Nothing that said Kai Liang was a man with memories and bad habits and a life beyond the monster the city whispered about. It was beautiful and cold and completely impersonal, and sitting there in nothing but his oversized shirt, Amara felt like a trespasser. Like she'd broken into an exhibit after hours, and any second someone would drag her out by the arm and throw her back where she belonged. She swung her legs out of bed, her bare feet touching icy hardwood, and wrapped her arms around herself as she drifted out into the main living space. The city sprawled out below the windows like a painting, glass towers, tiny cars crawling along streets she couldn't hear. From up here, her world didn't exist. You couldn't see the diner on 14th and Willow, or the cracked sidewalk outside her building, or the laundromat where she counted quarters. Up here was another universe, one where people like her were background noise, not residents. Her phone was the only familiar thing in sight. It sat alone on a slab of pale marble in the kitchen area, looking stupidly small and cheap in all that expensive space. The cracked screen, the peeling pink case, the crooked sticker she'd used to hide a scratch, that was her life, her real life. Her stomach tightened as she grabbed it and hit the button. The screen lit up and the blood drained from her face. 15 missed calls, 8 text messages, 3 voicemails, all from one name, Gary, Diner. She didn't need to listen to know the tone. Where are you? You're late. We're slammed. If you're not here in 30 minutes, don't bother coming in at all. The diner did not forgive no-call, no-shows, and she hadn't just missed a shift. She'd walked out in the middle of one and never went back. Reality collapsed over her like a falling building. She'd lost her job. Her rent was due in 5 days. The last time she checked her account, it had read $234 and some pathetic cents. And that was before the automatic payment for her phone bill. No savings, no backup, no family she could run to. She had burned her entire life down for a man she'd only ever known, from across a counter on Thursday nights. What the hell did you do, Amara? The thought came sharp and bitter. You threw away everything for a man who might get you killed. She forced herself to move, drifting through the penthouse, like she was walking through someone else's dream. The living room was all sleek lines and designer furniture that looked like it hurt to sit on. A black leather couch that could have been in a showroom, a glass coffee table so clear she almost walked into it. No mugs, no TV remotes, no random junk or crumbs or signs that someone actually lived here. Abstract art splashed across the walls in colors that probably came with 5-digit price tags. Everything was curated, perfect, sterile. There were no framed photos, no goofy group shots, no childhood pictures, no evidence that anyone had ever loved him enough to put his face in a frame. No evidence he'd ever loved anyone either. Just a very expensive, very beautiful cage, lined in stone and glass and emptiness. Something in her chest twisted at that. Maybe this was what loneliness looked like when you wrapped it in money. A narrow hallway led off the main room, 3 doors spaced evenly along the wall. The first door opened into a bathroom so pristine it could have been staged. Black marble, chrome fixtures, towels folded like a hotel, not a single bottle left out of place. The second door revealed a walk-in closet that swallowed her whole, full of dark suits arranged by shade, shirts aligned like soldiers, belts and ties and watches displayed in neat, obsessive rows. Control, order, no chaos allowed. The third door was closed, and this one wasn't normal. A sleek black keypad blinked softly to the right of the frame, numbers glowing faint in the dim light. Above it, a tiny camera lens watched the hallway. No knob, no simple lock, just tech and secrets. Amara stopped dead. Her skin prickled. What do you keep behind a door like that, Kai? Money, drugs, guns, files that could topple governments, bodies? Her mind leapt from one horrible possibility to another, and each one made the air feel thinner. She lifted her hand before she could stop herself and hovered her fingers near the pad. The numbers waited, cool and silent. She tapped one at random. The panel flashed an angry red and buzzed softly, and she jerked her hand back like it had burned her. "Okay," she muttered under her breath. Message received. She backed away from the door, pulse skittering. There were whole pieces of him she didn't know, whole rooms in his life literally locked away. Last night, he had poured his heart out to her, told her about blood and loneliness, and the monster he'd become, but seeing that keypad, knowing there were still secrets so big he hid them even from her, hit differently. That was when she heard him. His voice cut through the quiet like a blade. Low and sharp, and nothing like the soft tone he used when he said her name. It came from deeper in the penthouse, from a room at the end of the hall with a door half cracked open. She moved toward it before she could talk herself out of it, footsteps silent on the floor. Kai stood with his back to her, framed by another wall of glass and city. One hand was braced on the window, the other pressed to his ear as he spoke into his phone. His shoulders were tense, his jaw clenched, the clean lines of his suit drawing stark lines across his body. He wasn't speaking English. The words spilling from his mouth were rapid Mandarin, sharp and hard, the syllables snapping like bones. She didn't know the language, but she understood the meaning: power, anger, threat. Whoever was on the other end of that call was in trouble. Amara flattened herself against the wall just outside the doorway, heart pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it over the call. She knew she shouldn't eavesdrop. She knew she should give him privacy, go back to the bedroom, pretend she'd heard nothing. But her feet stayed glued to the floor. This was the side of him everyone else knew. The side she'd only glimpsed in headlines and whispers. The dragon at work. His voice dropped even lower, the Mandarin tightening. And then suddenly he switched to English. Every word clean and deadly. "That's not a request," he said, so calm it made her stomach twist. "It's an order. Handle it, or I'll handle you." A pause. She could almost hear the other person scrambling on the line. Kai didn't give them much time. "You have until tonight. If I have to get involved personally, you won't like the outcome. Do we understand each other?" Another pause. Then a final, quieter line that somehow sounded worse than shouting. "Good! Don't make me come down there." The call ended with a soft click. Silence dropped back over the penthouse, heavier than before. Amara stared at him through the narrow slice of doorway, her entire body trembling. That was him. Not the version who smirked over coffee and handed her outrageous tips. Not the man who walked her to her car and slipped money into her jar labeled nursing school because he liked to support dreams. This was the man people feared, the one associated with bodies that floated up in rivers, with businesses that paid protection just to be left alone. The man whose last name made cops look the other way and judges forget how to read. She had fallen in love with Kai, the lonely man who came in every Thursday and looked at her like she was the only real thing in his world. But this was Kai Liang, the dragon. And she hadn't just kissed him, she'd chosen him. A wave of doubt crashed so hard she had to brace her palm against the wall to stay upright. What if she'd made a huge mistake? What if the gentleman from the diner was just a mask he wore for an hour a week, and this cold, ruthless stranger was who he truly was the rest of the time? What if she had torched her entire life for a fantasy that was going to swallow her whole? But under the fear, something else refused to die. The memory of his eyes last night, raw and terrified, when he told her she was his only real thing. The way his hands shook when he said, "I love you," like the words cost more than money. The way he'd given her a choice, stay and risk everything or walk away and never see him again, and actually meant it. That hadn't felt like an act. That hadn't felt like the dragon manipulating another pawn. That had felt like a man on his knees without actually kneeling. She swallowed hard, forcing air into her lungs, and straightened her spine. She'd walked into this with her eyes open. Maybe not wide open, maybe not seeing every angle, but he hadn't lied about who he was. She'd known he was dangerous. She'd known his world was dark. She'd known there would be things she wouldn't like. And last night, in that cheap diner with the flickering lights and the rain pounding on the roof, she'd decided to step into that darkness anyway, because the thought of going back to a life where no one really saw her hurt more than the risk of being consumed. There was no going back now. Gary had probably already replaced her. Her landlord didn't care about love stories. The safe, small version of her life was already burning behind her. The only path left was forward, toward the closed door, toward the man inside, toward the dragon in daylight. Amara pushed herself away from the wall and walked toward the office, each step louder in her ears than the last. Her heart hammered, her throat felt tight, but she didn't stop. If she was going to survive this, she couldn't afford to be the girl who hid around corners listening. She had to be the woman who walked into the room and met the monster she loved face to face. Kai found her before she could knock. She'd barely taken 3 steps toward the office when the door opened and he stepped out, phone still in his hand, the last trace of that lethal calm fading from his face the second his eyes landed on her. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other. Him in a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, her in his t-shirt and bare feet, clutching her cracked phone like it was a shield. His whole expression softened. "Amara," he said quietly, like her name was a relief. "You're awake." She wasn't sure what she'd expected. Distance, maybe. Guilt. A cold, businesslike version of him that pretended last night hadn't happened. Instead, he looked almost uncertain, like he didn't know if he was allowed to touch her. "You ran off before I woke up," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. One corner of his mouth twitched. "I didn't sleep." He lifted the phone slightly. "Meetings. Problems. Boring things that have very little to do with you and everything to do with idiots who don't know how to follow instructions." She thought of the call she'd overheard and knew boring was a lie. Still, he stepped closer, the tension in his shoulders easing as he really took her in. "Did you eat?" he asked. She blinked. Of all the questions he could have started with, that wasn't on her list. "No." "Good," he said, then winced. "Not good that you didn't eat. Good because I brought food. Come on." He took a step back, giving her room to walk past him instead of crowding her, and she noticed that too. Last night, he'd felt huge, overwhelming like gravity. This morning, he held himself carefully, like she was something fragile, and he was terrified of breaking her on accident. The kitchen island had transformed while she'd been wandering the penthouse. 2 plates sat there now, steam curling from a breakfast that looked like it belonged in one of those fancy hotel ads. Fluffy eggs, toast that wasn't burnt, fresh fruit cut into perfect pieces. There was coffee, too, the rich, dark smell wrapping around her like a memory. "You like your coffee light," he said, already reaching for the cream and sugar. 3 creams, 2 sugars. I guessed on the brand, but it's close to what you use at the diner. Her chest tightened. "You remember that?" He gave her a look that said he remembered everything. "I've watched you make it 6 months. He slid a mug toward her and waited until she sat before he took the stool opposite. For a minute, they ate in silence, the clink of forks against plates the only sound. The food was good, better than anything she'd had in a long time. It still tasted like guilt in her mouth. He noticed. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. She almost lied, almost said nothing, and smiled and pretended she was fine. But last night she'd promised herself that if she was going to do this, if she was going to step into his world, she wouldn't keep lying to make other people comfortable. "I lost my job," she said, staring at the pale yellow of her eggs. "Gary called 15 times. I didn't pick up. I walked out mid-shift with you and never went back. He's not exactly known for second chances." Kai didn't look surprised. Of course he didn't. "You knew that might happen when you left with me. I knew in the way you know eating too much sugar is bad for you," she muttered. Abstract, not in the wake up and realize you have $200 and no income way. He was quiet for a moment, then he set his fork down. "Look at me." She did. His eyes were dark and steady, none of that earlier sharpness in them. "You will never worry about rent again," he said simply. "Or food, or bills, or cars breaking down. Those problems are gone." The words should have felt like comfort. Instead, they landed like a chain. Her fingers tightened around the mug. "That's not how life works for people like me, Kai. I don't just wake up one day and decide no more money problems because a man says so. You didn't decide." His gaze didn't waver. "I did. You're mine now. That means your survival is my responsibility. Your comfort is my job. You don't struggle while I sit in a glass tower counting money. I won't allow it." Something hot flared in her chest at the word mine, a mix of warmth and warning. Part of her wanted to wrap herself in that protection and never think about overdue bills again. The other part heard the unspoken price tag. She set the mug down carefully. "So what? I just live here, eat your food, sleep in your bed, and you pay for everything?" His jaw flexed. "Yes." "That sounds a lot like being kept," she said. "Like a pet you feed in house so it doesn't run away." His eyes flashed with something dangerous. Not anger at her, anger at the word. "Don't call yourself that. You are not a pet." "Then what am I?" she shot back. "Because I walked in here with a broke girl bank account and walked out of my life for you. I don't have anything of my own. No job, no savings, no backup plan. All I have is you, and that scares me." He went still, then leaned forward, forearms braced on the marble. When he spoke, his voice had dropped into that low, serious register she was starting to recognize as the place right before he tore the world down. "Right now," he said, "you are the woman I love who is sitting in my kitchen worrying about rent when she should be worrying about how many times I'm going to kiss her before lunch. So let's fix that." He reached under the island and pulled out a sleek black shopping bag she hadn't noticed before. Then another and another. He lined them up in front of her like some rich, dramatic magician. "What is all this?" she whispered. "Clothes," he said. "Shoes. Things that actually fit you instead of that uniform some asshole made you wear while underpaying you." Her throat closed. "Kai..." He set a slim white box on the counter and slid it toward her. Inside was a brand new phone, the latest model, screen so bright and smooth it made her battered one look like a toy. "That's for you," he went on calmly. "This one." He tapped the new device. "Has my private number, my driver's, my head of security. and my personal assistant already programmed. If you need something, you call. Day or night, you never go without help again. And this. He reached into his pocket and placed a small, heavy rectangle on the marble. A metal credit card, dark and sharp-edged, her name already engraved beneath his. Next to it, he set a key fob. Card has no limit. Apartment, food, school, whatever you want. The key is for the car in your spot downstairs. She stared at the pile between them like it might explode. Phone, card, keys, designer bags. Solutions to problems that had haunted her since she was old enough to understand overdue notices. Within arm's reach. All she had to do was accept. Everything I have is yours now, Amara, he said quietly. That's what "you're mine" means to me. You get all of it. The words should have sounded romantic. They did. But they also sounded like a contract. Her first instinct was to push it all back across the counter. Her pride screamed at her to refuse. But pride didn't pay rent. Pride didn't pay for nursing school. Pride didn't buy groceries. I don't want to be bought, she whispered. His gaze softened. This isn't about buying you. You're not for sale. If you walked out that door right now and never came back, I'd still make sure you were taken care of. Money is easy for me. You are not. He said it simply, like it was a fact he'd weighed and accepted. Amara looked down at the card, the key, the brand new phone. She thought of Gary's likely voicemail, of her landlord's last text, warning her that being a week late again meant late fees. Of her mother's old voice in her head telling her to take help when you need it, that survival wasn't shameful. Very slowly, she closed her fingers around the phone box and the card. Her cheeks burned. This doesn't mean I'm okay being kept, she said. I'm still figuring out what that means. But I also don't want to end up on the street because my pride is loud. His shoulders eased, some of the tension loosening. Good. Because I'd just buy the whole building and evict your landlord anyway. She snorted despite herself. That's not better. He opened his mouth to answer, but a discreet knock at the penthouse door cut him off. Every muscle in his body tightened like someone had flipped a switch. In the span of one breath, he went from soft, amused boyfriend to the dragon again. His eyes sharpened, his posture straightened, and the room felt colder. Stay here, he said. I'm not a child. I know. His gaze held hers for a long second. Stay here anyway. He walked to the door, checking the camera display on the wall before he opened it. Amara slid off the stool, curiosity pulling her forward despite his order, and stopped where she could see without being obvious. A man stepped inside, tall and lean in a black suit that didn't fit as perfectly as Kai's, but came close. He was Asian, maybe mid-30s, with a scar along his jaw that made him look like he'd been punched by life more than once, and learned to punch back harder. His eyes flicked over the room in one quick sweep, missing nothing before landing on her. For a full second, he just stared. So, he said finally, turning back to Kai. His voice was dry, edged with something like disbelief. It's true, you brought her here. Marcus, Kai said in warning. Marcus, second in command. The right hand she'd heard him mention exactly twice in the diner, always in vague terms. Seeing him in person made everything too real. Marcus gave Kai a look that said they'd be having a very long, very loud discussion later, then shifted his attention back to Amara. You must be Amara, he said. Her spine straightened. You must be the person judging me from the doorway. A ghost of a smirk touched his mouth, there and gone. She has teeth. That's new. Enough, Kai cut in. This is my home. You don't get to come in here and interrogate my guest. Your guest, Marcus echoed, switching to rapid Mandarin for a few sentences that were obviously less polite. His tone sharpened. Kai's did too, as he answered back in the same language, faster and more heated. She couldn't understand the words, but she understood Marcus's glance in her direction. Trouble, liability, problem. She saw the way his jaw clenched when Kai said something that sounded final. Then Kai snapped in English. She's not going anywhere. The words cracked through the room like a whip. Silence fell. Marcus's eyes met his for a long, loaded beat. Something unspoken passed between them. History, loyalty, anger, fear, all tangled. Then Marcus exhaled slowly and gave the smallest of nods. Not agreement, a temporary surrender. Fine, he said. You have a delivery. He jerked his chin toward the open door. A second man, one of the suited ghosts she'd glimpsed in the lobby, stepped in, carrying a black rectangular box about the size of a hat box. No label, no logo, just matte black cardboard and a thin ribbon. Every hair on the back of Amara's neck stood up. Kai's entire presence went still. He didn't touch the box at first, just studied it like he could see through it. Who brought it? He asked. Courier we don't recognize, Marcus said. Face is on camera, ran it, nothing in the system, clean. Of course he is, Kai muttered. He reached out and took the box, fingers careful, and set it on the island between him and Amara. Up close, it seemed heavier than it looked. The air in the kitchen tightened. Don't, she started, but the lid was already coming off. Inside, nestled in black tissue paper, was a bouquet, or what used to be one, roses, or rather, the shriveled, dead remains of roses, their petals gone black and brittle, stems twisted and dry, heads lolling at broken angles. The faint smell of rot drifted up, not strong, but enough to make her stomach flip. On top of the ruined flowers lay a single card. Kai picked it up between two fingers and read it, his jaw locking so hard she heard his teeth click. What does it say? She asked, even though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. He didn't answer right away. Then he turned the card so she could see. Congratulations on your new pet. Let's see how long she lasts. A friend. For a heartbeat, everything inside her went cold. Pet. The word she'd thrown at him earlier, coming back at her like a knife with someone else's fingerprints on it. Her vision narrowed on the dead roses, on the cruel handwriting. Someone out there knew she was here, knew she mattered to Kai, knew enough to send a message straight to his home. This wasn't random. This was a warning. Fear crawled up her spine, icy and electric. This is what being with him means, she realized. Not just expensive sheets and glass windows, targets, threats, people she'd never met deciding whether she lived or died based on how useful she was to the man they feared. She looked up at Kai. He wasn't just angry. He was deadly. The softness from breakfast was gone. His eyes were black ice, his body coiled tight. When he spoke, his voice was the same one she'd heard on the phone, the one that made grown men on the other end stammer. Get the footage from the lobby and the street, he said to Marcus. Every camera within 2 blocks. I want eyes on them in 10 minutes. Already on it, Marcus replied. Double the guards on this floor. No one gets in without going through 3 levels of security. I want 2 men outside my door and 2 at the elevators at all times. No breaks. Rotate every 2 hours. Marcus nodded once. What about, if anyone so much as looks at her wrong, Kai continued, cutting him off. I want their name, address, family tree, and burial preferences on my desk before midnight. We're not waiting for them to make a second move. The matter-of-fact way he said burial preferences made her stomach clench. Marcus left without another word, already pulling out his phone. The second man took the box, holding it like it was something poisoned, and followed. The moment the door shut behind them, the apartment felt different. The air was thick with threat and rage and something else vibrating just beneath Kai's skin. Amara realized she was still gripping the counter. Her knuckles had gone white. So, she said, forcing her voice not to shake. I'm guessing that wasn't from a florist. He looked at her sharply. Whatever monster had been climbing up his spine softened a fraction at the sound of her voice. No, he said. It wasn't. Pet, she repeated, swallowing. They called me your pet. They called you Leverage, he corrected softly. Which makes them stupider than I thought. She stared at him. So, this is it then. I've been here less than a day, and someone already wants to see how fast they can break me. His jaw worked. They're not going to touch you. You don't know that. I do. His gaze locked with hers, dark and fierce. Because I will burn this city to ash before I let them. The certainty in his voice should have comforted her. It did, a little. but it also scared her in a new way. Because that was the thing about choosing a man like Kai. When he promised to protect you, he meant it literally. With blood and fire if necessary. Her heart was still racing, fear flickering in the back of her mind like a neon warning sign. But beneath it, deeper and more stubborn, something else rose up. Anger. Not at him. At whoever thought a box of dead roses and an ugly word were enough to send her running. She straightened, letting go of the counter. "I'm not going to break," she said quietly. His eyes searched hers. "You're shaking." "I'd be more worried if I wasn't," she shot back. "But I'm still here. And I'm not packing a bag because some anonymous coward with too much time and not enough spine sent you a funeral bouquet." A muscle jumped in his cheek. "Amara, you said I had a choice," she cut in. "You gave me one last night. I made it. I'm not going to let strangers scare me out of it before I've even had time to regret it properly." For the first time since he'd opened the door to Marcus, something like pride flickered in his eyes. "You should be running," he said honestly. "Any sane person would be halfway to another state by now." "Yeah, well," she exhaled. "Nobody's ever accused me of being sane. Besides, if I leave now and they want to find me, don't they just find me? At least here, they have to get through you first." His expression softened in a way that made her chest ache. "They'll never get through me," he said. Fear still curled at the edges of her thoughts like smoke, but it wasn't enough to drown out the stubborn fire in her chest. Someone in his world had just announced they wanted to see how fast she'd break. They were about to find out she didn't shatter that easily. Amara barely had time to let the dead roses sink in before the next hit came. Kai had just finished barking one last order at whoever was coordinating security, when the sound of a key turning in the front door cut through the room. Not the coded beep of his system or the knock of a guard asking permission. Metal in a lock, smooth and familiar, like whoever was on the other side had been doing this for years. His head snapped toward the entryway. The look on his face was not surprise. It was something uglier, annoyance, dread, anger, all knotted tight. "Who has a key to your place?" Amara asked, but he didn't answer. The door opened. The woman who stepped into the penthouse didn't belong to the same world Amara came from. She didn't even look like she belonged to the same planet. Long black hair slicked back into a perfect knot at the nape of her neck, not a strand out of place. Makeup sharp enough to cut, red lipstick that said she never heard the word no. Her suit was tailored within an inch of its life, a deep emerald that made her skin glow and her diamond earrings catch every shard of light in the room. She walked in like she owned the place, like she owned him. Her gaze swept the space, slow and assessing, taking in the breakfast dishes, the open shopping bags, the black box of dead roses still on the counter. Then her eyes landed on Amara. For a second, they simply stared at each other. Vivian's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. It was an evaluation, a verdict already half written. "So," she said, voice smooth as silk over steel, "this is the waitress everyone's talking about." Amara's pulse kicked. The word hit harder than it should have. Waitress, not Amara, not the woman in Kai's shirt, not the person who just set her entire life on fire. Just her job title, said like an insult. Kai moved before Amara could answer. "Vivienne," he said, and the way he said her name told Amara everything. Familiarity with no affection. "You weren't invited." Vivienne didn't even look at him at first. Her eyes stayed on Amara, unapologetically bold, sliding from her messy hair down to her bare legs and back up again, cataloging every detail like she was inspecting cheap merchandise. "No," Vivienne agreed lightly, "but then, if I waited for invitations from you, we'd never see each other at all, would we?" Only then did she glance at him, raising one perfectly drawn brow. "Relax, Kai. I got tired of hearing rumors and decided to see for myself." "Rumors?" Amara repeated, because apparently her mouth wanted to be brave, even while her stomach flipped. Vivian's attention snapped back to her. "About you," she said. "The little diner girl he couldn't stop visiting, the one who made him late to meetings because he needed coffee." She mimed air quotes, mocking. Honestly, I thought they were exaggerating, but you really are adorably ordinary. Heat flooded Amara's face. She opened her mouth, but Vivienne was already moving, the sharp click of her heels echoing on the floor, as she strode farther into the room like she owned every inch of it. Kai, she said, ignoring Amara for a moment, we need to talk, privately. We're not doing anything privately, he said flatly. Not anymore. Vivienne's gaze flicked between them, something calculating sparking in her eyes. Then she laughed, a low, amused sound that made Amara's skin prickle. Oh, she said. I see. We're at that stage. What stage is that? Amara asked tightly. The delusional one. Vivienne dropped her expensive handbag onto the couch and turned fully to Amara, folding her arms. Let me guess. He told you I'm just a business associate, a distant friend, someone whose family knows his family? I didn't, Kai began. You didn't tell her at all. Did you? Vivienne cut in, voice sugar-sweet and poisonous. Of course you didn't. Why ruin the fantasy? She tilted her head, studying Amara like she was some mildly interesting insect that had wandered onto the marble. My name is Vivienne Zhao, she said. My family controls the East Harbor and half the ports on this coast. Your boyfriend, she lingered on the word, amused, runs most of the inland operation. 10 years ago, when we were both still pretending to be teenagers instead of weapons, our fathers drew up a lovely little arrangement. She held out her left hand. For the first time, Amara saw the ring. It wasn't subtle. A band of platinum and diamonds that probably cost more than Amara's entire student loan debt combined, catching light from every direction. We are engaged, Vivienne said pleasantly. Have been, technically, since we were 17. The ceremony is in 6 months. White flowers, too many guests, security nightmares. You know how it is. Her tone suggested Amara did not, in fact, know how it was. The words landed like a slap. Engaged. Amara's brain tripped over the syllables. Her fingers dug into the edge of the island to keep herself from sliding right to the floor. She turned to Kai slowly. Tell me she's lying. His silence said enough. She's not lying, Vivienne said, enjoying every inch of Amara's shock. Our engagement is a blood contract, sweetheart. Money, territory, peace. The usual romantic things. She flicked an imaginary speck of dust from her sleeve. 2 empires stay friendly. Nobody loses money. Nobody's men start shooting each other in the streets. Very old-fashioned. Very necessary. Vivienne, Kai said, voice low and dangerous. Shut up. No, Amara said, before she could stop herself, her voice cracking. Don't. Keep talking. Apparently, you're the only one in this room telling me the truth. Vivienne's eyes flashed with interest. See, I like her. She has a spine. Shame about the timing. Amara forced herself to breathe around the rock lodged in her chest. You're getting married in 6 months to her. She pointed, hand trembling. And you asked me to come home with you and choose you knowing that. It's not like that, Kai said immediately. Vivienne laughed. It's exactly like that. She took a few steps closer to Amara, lowering her voice like they were girlfriends, sharing gossip. This wedding is not optional, she said. There are contracts, deals, quiet agreements keeping a lot of unpleasant men from killing each other. My family has been pouring money into joint ventures with his for years. Investors, politicians, judges on both sides lined up to attend, smile for pictures, and pretend they haven't laundered more blood than a hospital. Her eyes glittered. You break that, and the people who lose are not the ones in designer suits. Stop, Kai snapped. You've made your point. Oh, I'm just getting started. Vivienne smiled at him sweetly, then looked back at Amara. Everyone knows about you. They've been whispering for months. The waitress who makes the dragon look soft. Honestly, it was cute at first. He's allowed to have hobbies. Her gaze slid over Amara again. But bringing you here, that's a different level of stupid. Amara's stomach flipped so hard she thought she might be sick. So what? She demanded hoarsely. I'm a hobby? For him? No. Vivienne's answer was too fast, too sharp to be a lie. That's the problem. He's never brought anyone into this space before. Not like this, not publicly. And now people are asking questions they shouldn't be asking. She sighed, almost theatrically, and reached into her bag, which is why I'm here to solve this for both of us. She pulled out a slim envelope and slid it across the island toward Amara with 2 fingers, like she was dealing cards. Open it, she said. Amara didn't move. Kai did. Don't touch that. Vivian rolled her eyes. Relax. It's not a bomb. I don't ruin countertops. Amara's fingers, acting on their own, reached for the envelope. It was thick, heavy, the paper too smooth to be anything but expensive. Inside was a stack of cashier's checks, neat and crisp, each 0 blurring into the next. Her vision swam. That, Vivian said calmly, is $500,000, $500,000, enough to pay off your debts, move somewhere far away, and live very comfortably while you finish nursing school. You can buy a car that doesn't squeal, eat something that isn't instant noodles, maybe even get therapy for whatever made you think any of this was a good idea. The room tilted slightly. The weight of what she was holding settled in her hands like lead. You're trying to buy me off, Amara whispered. Of course I am, Vivian said. Let's not pretend this is anything else. You leave. He sulks. I let him yell at me in private. 6 months from now, he stands next to me in a picture for the newspapers, and we both get to keep our empires intact. Nobody has to die because you wanted to play Mafia princess for a little while. Amara's fingers tightened around the envelope. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. What happens if I say no? She asked. Vivian's smile vanished. Her eyes went sharp, predator cold. Then you are no longer a private embarrassment, she said softly. You become a problem, and problems in our world are solved in very permanent ways. Vivienne, Kai warned. His voice had dropped into that low, lethal register again. Do not threaten her. I'm not threatening, Vivian said, still looking at Amara. I'm giving her information. Do you have any idea how many delicate little agreements are balanced on this engagement? Contracts, territory lines, hush money, pipelines, financial and otherwise. His men expect him to marry me. My men expect me to marry him. Police expect the partnership. Judges, suppliers, foreign investors. You think they'll all just shrug and say, love wins, because you make his coffee right? Amara said nothing. She couldn't. The envelope in her hands might as well have been a live wire. If he breaks the engagement for you, Vivian continued, her voice almost gentle now, my family will read it as betrayal. So will half of his allies. We declare the contract void, we pull money, we pull protection, we pull tolerance. And in our world, that does not mean angry posts on the internet. She leaned closer, eyes locking onto Amara's. It means shootings, bombs, businesses burned down with people inside. Men who've been pretending to be friends on paper finally get their excuse to do what they've always wanted, tear each other apart. Her words painted pictures Amara didn't want in her head. Civilians caught in crossfire. Families huddling on the floor as windows shattered. Workers at late-night shops who just wanted to get through a shift and go home, ending up in the wrong place at the wrong time. All that blood, Vivian murmured, over one girl. And whether you like it or not, little waitress, every drop will sit on your conscience. Because you knew. I told you. And you decided your feelings were worth more than all of them. Silence roared in Amara's ears. The envelope in her hands felt like an anchor dragging her down. $500,000 to walk away, and the unspoken promise of bodies if she didn't. Her throat burned. Kai, who'd been quiet too long, finally moved. He stepped between them, taking some of the pressure off her like he could physically shield her from the weight of Vivian's words. She doesn't carry my sins, he said tightly. If there's blood, it's on me, on our fathers, on men who made deals a decade ago, not on her. Vivian's attention flicked to him. You think they care about nuance? You think anyone is going to look at her and say, poor thing, it wasn't her fault while they're counting their dead? They'll want a symbol, a name, someone to hate. She nodded toward Amara. She's perfect for it. Pretty, powerless, easy to blame. You made sure of that when you brought her here. Amara's chest was so tight it hurt to breathe. The room, the windows, The city outside, all of it felt like it was pressing in on her. "I never asked for any of this," she said, voice coming out raw. "I didn't ask you to love me. I didn't ask to be part of your deals, your contracts, your whatever this is." "No," Vivian agreed, "you didn't. But you're in it now, and I am offering you a way out that doesn't end with you on a slab or me picking shrapnel out of my hair." She stepped back, smoothing her jacket, mask of polite elegance snapping back into place. "So, here's your choice," she said crisply. "Take the money, disappear, finish your little dreams somewhere far away where no one knows your name. Or stay and watch what happens when one woman thinks she's more important than the fragile excuse for peace our fathers built." She picked up her handbag and glided toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and glanced over her shoulder, eyes colder than the marble underfoot. "You have 48 hours, she added. "After that, things start to move, with or without you. Think very carefully about who you want to bury, Amara, yourself or everyone else." The door closed behind her with a soft, expensive click. For a long moment, there was nothing, no sound, no movement, just the thunder of Amara's heartbeat. Then she looked down at the envelope in her hands, at the promise of safety wrapped in paper and ink and blood. Very slowly, she set it down on the counter like it was something filthy. "I'm not for sale," she said. Her voice was shaking, but the words were solid. "Not for $500,000, not for $1 million, not for peace." She lifted her gaze to Kai's, and whatever she saw there, guilt, fear, desperation, made something inside her finally snap. "You're engaged," she said, the word tasting like acid. "You were engaged this whole time, for years, and you never told me." "Amara, no." Her eyes burned, hot and furious. "You stood in my diner and told me I was your only real thing. You stood there and said you were a monster, but at least you were honest with me. Then you dragged me out of my life, asked me to choose you, and forgot to mention there's a wedding in 6 months, with your name already printed on the invitations." "It's not real," he said, stepping toward her. "It's a contract, a cage I've been trying to break for years. I never wanted." "But you signed it," she shot back. "You let them put a ring on her finger. You let the whole world believe she's your future, while you're in my diner whispering about one honest night." His jaw clenched. "I told you my life is complicated. I told you there were things you wouldn't like." "Complicated is forgetting to text back," she snapped. "Complicated is long distance. Complicated is not, by the way, I'm supposed to marry someone else to prevent a bloodbath. That's not complicated, Kai. That's betrayal." Her hand shook as she gestured between them. "You made me choose you without giving me all the pieces. You let me fall knowing there was a ring on someone else's hand with your name attached. You looked me in the eye and called this real while you were already promised somewhere else." Her voice broke on the last words. She swallowed hard, hating the sting in her eyes. He reached for her. "Amara, I am not marrying Vivian. I don't care what papers our fathers signed. I don't care what they expect. You are the one." "Don't," she whispered, backing out of his reach. "Don't say I'm the one like that makes it better. You don't get to use those words like a bandage when you're the one holding the knife." The envelope on the counter sat between them like a physical manifestation of the truth she couldn't unsee. Money, contracts, violence, promises he'd made to someone else long before he ever walked into her diner. Her chest ached with betrayal, rage, heartbreak, all tangled together until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. "Last night," she said, voice raw, "I thought the worst thing about loving you was that you were a criminal." She laughed then, a small, broken sound. "I was wrong," she whispered. "The worst thing is realizing you're a liar, too." Silence stretched between them like a live wire. Kai didn't flinch from her accusation, but something in his face cracked. The flawless, untouchable dawn slipped, and for a second she saw the man from the diner again, the one who watched her like she was the first sunrise he'd seen in years. "It was political," he said at last, voice low. "The engagement. A deal our fathers made when we were kids. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. I inherited it with everything else when my father died." Amara laughed, harsh and unbelieving. "You inherited a ring on another woman's hand. Sounds pretty important to mention." It was never about love, he pushed on, like he hadn't heard her. It was territory, shipping lines, money. They tied us together on paper so no one would start a war they couldn't finish. Vivian and I, we were weapons pointed at each other's families, not sweethearts picking out flowers. We barely spoke unless there was a lawyer in the room. That's supposed to make me feel better, she snapped. That you didn't love her while you promised to marry her? His jaw flexed. I've been trying to get out of it for years, looking for leverage, an angle, a way to cut the tie without dragging half the city into a bloodbath. My father signed things in blood I can't just rip up because I woke up one day and decided I wanted to be happy. So you just did nothing. Her voice climbed, breaking. You wore the ring in your pocket and let everyone believe you were spoken for while you sat in my section every Thursday, making me feel like the only person in your world. He stepped toward her. I didn't do nothing. I stalled. I delayed the ceremony. I restructured deals. I started moving money into places where her family couldn't reach. The second I met you, every plan I had shifted. You weren't supposed to be part of this, Amara. You were supposed to be my one clean thing. Clean, she repeated, the word tasting dirty. Is that what this is to you? Clean? His eyes burned. Meeting you was the first time in 10 years I wanted something that wasn't about power or survival. You smiled at me like I was just a man. You told me about your day. You cared if I burned my hand. You made me remember I had a heart and not just a ledger. For the first time, I had a reason to break the cage instead of just rattling it. You had a reason, she said slowly, and 6 months to tell me the bars existed. He went still. You sat at my counter every Thursday for half a year, she said, anger finally igniting past the hurt. You watched me pour your coffee. You watched me count tips. You watched me talk about nursing school and rent and how tired I was of being invisible. And at any point in those 6 months, you could have said, by the way, there's a woman out there with my ring on her finger, and if I choose you, people might die. Amara, you had last night, she cut in, voice shaking. When you stood there and told me about your parents and your monsters and how you were in love with me. When you asked me to risk my whole life for one night of honesty. You could have told me then too, but you didn't because you knew if I had all the information, I might walk away. His silence was the only admission she needed. That's why you didn't say anything, she whispered. Not because it didn't matter. Not because it was some distant, meaningless paper. You didn't tell me because you were afraid I'd hear engaged and say no. His hands curled into fists at his sides. I was afraid you'd hear engaged and think you were nothing but a distraction, that you'd put yourself back in that little box the world shoved you into and decide you weren't allowed to want more. I couldn't. He cut himself off, exhaling sharply. I was going to break it. I am going to break it. I just needed time to line things up so you didn't step into a war zone. And instead, she said, you dragged me into the middle blind. The truth of it hung between them, thick and ugly. He didn't argue. Couldn't. Behind the anger, fear coiled in her gut like a snake. Vivian's words replayed whether she wanted them or not. Contracts, territory, blood on her conscience. If he broke the engagement, people would come for him, for her, for anyone caught in the blast radius of their choice. She glanced toward the huge windows. The city kept moving outside, cars, lights, thousands of people living their lives with no idea 2 crime families were using them as numbers on a balance sheet. If she walked away now, they'd never know how close they'd come to being collateral damage. If she stayed, some of them might end up paying for a love story they weren't part of. Her throat burned. I can't go back, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Gary won't take me. Everyone at the diner saw me leave with you. If Vivian knows my name, her people know my face. I can't just show up to the next shift and pretend I don't have a target on my back. No, Kai agreed quietly. You can't. And if I stay, she said, forcing herself to look at him, your world might start killing itself just to make a point. Not if I handle it, he said. Not if I move first. She let out a short, humorless laugh. God, listen to you. If I move first. You talk about war like it's a scheduling conflict. He winced. Something inside her caved, just a little. The girl who'd grown up counting tips and memorizing coupon days wanted to sit down, curl into him, and let him handle everything. Let him fix it with money and threats and the sheer force of his will the way he tried to fix everything else. But that girl was the one who kept ending up broke and exhausted while other people made choices over her head. She looked down at the things on the counter, the new phone, the metal card, the keys, the envelope Vivienne had left like a bribe on top of all of it. Symbols of every way her life had been yanked out of her hands and passed back and forth between powerful people like a toy. Enough. Amara reached for the metal card and the phone, closing her fingers around them with a decisiveness that surprised even her. His brow furrowed. "What are you doing?" "Taking what I'm owed," she said. A flash of hurt crossed his face. "I told you this isn't about— This is about survival," she cut in sharply. "You threw a grenade into my life, Kai. You walked into my diner. You made yourself the center of my world. And then you pulled me out of it without giving me a parachute. I lost my job for you. I lost my safety for you. I might lose my anonymity, my peace, hell, my life. The very least you can do is pay tuition." He stared at her, stunned silent for a second. She pushed on, the words coming faster now that she'd ripped them loose. "I'm using this card to pay for nursing school," she said. "Fully. Up front. No loans, no begging banks that don't care if I drop dead from exhaustion. I'm getting my own apartment. My name on the lease, my keys, my bed. Not yours. I'm buying a car that starts when I turn the key. I'm building something that belongs to me, even if this—" she gestured between them— "goes to hell." His expression shifted, hurt giving way to something like reluctant admiration. "You think I'll let you live alone knowing someone just sent dead flowers to my doorstep?" he asked quietly. "I think you don't get to let me do anything," she shot back. "That's the point. If we're ever going to have a chance at something real, it can't be you in your glass tower and me as your project. Your kept secret. Your guilt offering to the ghost of the boy you used to be. I am not moving from one kind of cage to another just because the new one has a better view." The harshness of her own words made her chest ache, but she didn't take them back. "If we're together," she said, voice steadier now, "it has to be as equals. I don't mean money, that part's impossible and we both know it. I mean choices. I mean I get to decide where I sleep, where I work, what risks I take. I'm not going to be a woman you tuck away in a penthouse and visit between meetings, or someone you hide because it's inconvenient to tell the world you picked the girl from the diner over the ring from your father." He flinched like she'd hit him. "You think that's all I want from you?" he asked, incredulous. "A pretty secret in a nice apartment?" "I think you don't know what it means to love someone who can say no to you," she replied. "You're used to being the final word, the man whose decisions end conversations. That's not going to be me." Silence hummed between them, hot and tight. "I need space," she said, each word heavy. "I need to think somewhere that isn't echoing with your voice, and your enemy's presence, and your fiancé's threats. I need to remember who I am when you're not in the room, because right now, I can't tell where you end and I start." His eyes darkened with something that looked dangerously close to panic. "You're leaving." "I'm not running," she said. "I'm stepping back, before I drown in decisions you made for us without asking me." He took a breath like he was about to beg. She saw him catch himself, swallow it, and choose a different tactic. "Where will you go?" he asked, voice rough. She glanced at the credit card in her hand. "A hotel, somewhere under an alias, paid with this. Then a school website, then an apartment listing, one step at a time." "You think I can't find you in a hotel?" he asked, something almost wounded in it. "I know you can," she said. "The question is whether you will, or whether you'll give me the space you said you would." His jaw worked. The part of him that was a man who loved her warred visibly with the part that was a criminal used to controlling every variable. Finally, he exhaled. "You're not safe alone right now." "I'm not safe anywhere right now," she countered. "At least out there, the walls won't whisper your name back at me." Something like surrender flickered across his features. It didn't look natural on him. "At least take a guard," he said. "One. Discreet." She hesitated. Pride wanted to say no. Common sense, still rattled by the dead bouquet and Vivienne's calm threats, said yes. One, she agreed begrudgingly. Outside the door, not in my pocket. Done. It was the easiest concession he'd made all morning. She turned away before the weight of his eyes could weaken her resolve, and headed for the bedroom, each step feeling like it echoed. Her old uniform was gone, but her cheap duffel bag sat where she'd dropped it last night, one strap hanging off the chair. She yanked it up onto the bed and started packing what little she'd brought, a few clothes, her toothbrush, the small jar of nursing school cash she'd grabbed, without thinking, on her way out of the diner. The room that had seemed cold and impersonal when she woke now felt worse, like it had tried on the illusion of being hers for one night and was already shrugging it off. In the doorway, she sensed a presence and looked up. Marcus leaned against the frame, arms crossed, eyes watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, not scorn, something sharper, measuring. "How long were you listening?" she asked. "Long enough," he said. "You know you're probably the first person who's told him no and lived." "Feels great," she said dryly, stuffing the last of her things into the bag. 10 out of 10. Highly recommend. For a split second, something like amusement flickered over his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that cool, assessing flatness again. "You really think you can walk away from him?" he asked. She met his gaze head-on. "I'm not walking away. I'm walking next to him, or not at all. He can decide if that's something he can handle." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, as if filing that away in some mental ledger. "You're either going to save him," he said quietly, "or finish him." "Not really my goal to do either," she said, zipping the bag. "I'm just trying not to lose myself." He said nothing to that, but she didn't miss the way his mouth tightened, or the speculative glint that flashed in his eyes, before he stepped aside to let her pass. As she walked back through the penthouse with her bag over her shoulder and Kai's card burning a hole in her palm, Amara felt something shift inside her. Fear was still there. How could it not be? But it wasn't steering the ship anymore. For the first time since he'd walked into her diner, she wasn't just reacting to his world, she was setting her own terms. Amara thought the worst of the morning was over. She was wrong. She had just shoved the last t-shirt into her duffel when her old phone, face down on the bedspread, buzzed once, then again, a rapid tremor against the sheets that made her nerves spike. Kai's people had already loaded a new device with numbers and security and safety. No one important should still be calling the cracked one, which meant this wasn't someone important. It was someone worse. She picked it up, thumb dragging over the battered screen. One new message from an unknown number. No name, no picture. Just digits she'd never seen in her life. "He's not the only one who's been obsessed with you." Her heart stuttered. For a second, she thought it was some sick joke from Vivienne. Then another message came through, this time with an attachment. A photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, her cheap phone struggling to keep up. It was the diner, the counter, the coffee pots, the neon sign reflected in the front window, and her, standing behind the counter in her faded uniform, pen tucked behind her ear, head tilted slightly as she listened to the man in front of her. Kai was sitting on the stool, his profile caught in the glass, his hand wrapped around a coffee cup. The timestamp in the corner hit her like a punch. 6 months ago, their first night. The image was grainy, taken from outside through the front glass. The angle slightly off, as if whoever took it was leaning against a car across the street, watching. Her fingers went numb. Another photo dropped into the thread before she could breathe, then another. Each one a moment she thought had belonged only to her, now captured from a distance by someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Her walking to her car after a double shift, shoulders slumped, handing a to-go cup to a cop at 2 a.m, laughing at something Manny said in the kitchen doorway. Her at the grocery store studying the price of cereal. Her fumbling with her keys outside her apartment, talking on the phone with a friend. 6 months of her life, sliced into still shots by an unseen hand. The last image made her throat close. It was from last night. Her standing in the rain outside the diner, Kai's coat around her shoulders, his hand on the small of her back as he steered her toward his car. The glow of the streetlights painted them in gold. From far away, they looked like any couple leaving a late shift together. From this angle, they looked like targets. The phone buzzed again. He didn't find you by accident. He chose you. Her lungs forgot how to work. She sank down onto the edge of the bed, bag half-zipped beside her, the walls pressing in. Her gaze flicked to the hallway, where the keypad door waited like a quiet accusation. The next message hit. The truth is, in the locked room. I left it open for you. Every hair on her body stood on end. She looked toward the bedroom door. The hallway beyond was empty, silent. The keypad hadn't beeped. No alarms had sounded. If the door was open, someone had changed that on purpose. Someone inside. Fear slithered through her veins, cold and metallic. For a second, instinct screamed at her to run straight to Kai, shove the phone into his hands, let him handle it. That was what he wanted. What his entire world was built for, problems handed to him to be solved with money and threats and quiet violence. But this wasn't just about him. This was about her. With her heart pounding in her throat, Amara stood up and walked into the hall. The keypad door loomed at the end like something out of a nightmare. This morning, its red numbers had glowed smugly, denying her entry. Now the panel was dark. The door itself, heavy, solid, wasn't quite closed. It was open just enough to show a slice of darkness inside. She stopped a few feet away, pulse roaring in her ears. Her mind flooded with worst-case scenarios, a gunman waiting in the shadows, a bomb wired to the frame, some horror scene she couldn't prepare for. The air felt heavier here, watched. If the stalker who'd sent those messages had gotten into this room, they'd gotten past Kai's security, past men with guns and cameras on every corner. That thought should have sent her running back the way she came. Instead, it pushed her forward. Because if someone else knew more about her life in this penthouse than she did, she needed to see it with her own eyes. She pressed her fingertips against the door and pushed. It swung inward with a soft whisper. The room beyond wasn't a dungeon. It wasn't a vault stacked with gold or a small private jail. It was worse. It was an office. Very normal, very quiet, very organized, and every inch of it was about her. For a moment, she just stood there on the threshold, frozen. The wall opposite her desk was covered in corkboard and pinstripes of string, not in the chaotic way of a conspiracy theorist, but in the neat, methodical lines of someone who did this for a living. Photos, documents, sticky notes in careful handwriting. Her face stared back at her from half a dozen angles, her behind the diner counter, smiling at a customer. Her sweeping the floor after close. Her sitting alone in a booth on a break, head bent over a nursing textbook. Her outside her apartment, bundled in a coat against the cold, keys in her hand. Her doing absolutely nothing remarkable, except for the fact that someone had been close enough and hidden enough to capture every moment. She stepped farther inside, each new detail slicing another layer off her denial. On one side of the board were official papers, neatly pinned and labeled. Amara Johnson, employee schedule. Each shift highlighted, start and end, times noted. Little marks in different colored pen that she realized were Thursdays, circled and annotated. Beneath that, apartment lease, 4B, Willow Street, underlined, another page. Something that looked like a credit report. Lines of numbers and debts and balances she'd tried very hard not to think about. Bank statements with her account number blacked out, but the totals clear enough to make her stomach twist. Next to them, a manila folder had been left half open on the desk. Her mother's name jumped out first, Sarah Johnson, oncology records. Her hand shook as she flipped it open. Hospital letterhead, test results, treatment plans, dates that traced the slow, brutal march of cancer through her mother's body, ending with a line she'd never wanted to read again. Deceased. Someone had gathered every scrap of medical detail about the worst 2 years of her life and filed them under research. She dropped the file like it burned. On the board, another set of documents waited. Diner, property deed. Her eyes raced over the dense legal language until they landed on the signature at the bottom, Kai Liang. The date, bold and stark, was 6 months before he ever walked through the door and ordered black coffee. He hadn't just picked her diner because it was convenient. He'd bought the whole building. Pinned next to the deed was a single sheet that made everything tilt. It wasn't official. It was a note, handwritten in a precise, slanted script she recognized from the way he'd once signed a receipt. Daughter of Sarah Johnson located, name Amara, occupation waitress, diner on 14th and Willow. Status, lives alone, financially unstable, no immediate family, approaching Thursday. Her stomach lurched, her vision blurred at the edges. Their first chance encounter, their random Thursday night moment when the bell over the door had chimed at 11:47 and she'd looked up and seen him. He hadn't been wandering in off the street that night. He'd been executing a plan. Her plan. Suddenly the office felt smaller. The air too thick. Nuggets of memory pushed to the surface. Sharp and vicious now that she saw them in this context. The way he'd known exactly when to show up for her breaks. The way he'd always been there on nights she worked alone, never when Manny had an extra cook on. The way he'd known her schedule without asking. It wasn't fate. It was surveillance. The buzzing in her pocket made her flinch. Another message. Told you, the text read. He's been watching you longer than you know. She didn't need the stranger's confirmation. The proof was stapled to the walls. She backed up until her shoulder hit one of the shelves lining the side of the room. More folders, more labels. Her name standing out again and again in crisp black ink, nursing applications. Copies of forms she'd submitted online, printed and neatly organized. Schools she'd only ever dared bookmark, their names underlined, requirements highlighted. Someone had researched her dreams in more detail than she had. Income, expense analysis. A spreadsheet breaking down how much she made in tips, how much she spent on rent, groceries, bills. Little notes in the margin, short this month, car repairs, electric overdue. Like a ruthless, efficient accountant tracking a gamble. She pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to scream. Tears burned behind her eyes, hot and humiliation sharp. She'd told herself her life wasn't worth anyone's attention. Apparently, she'd been wrong. Someone thought she was worth a piece of corkboard and a room behind a keypad. Someone thought she was worth buying a building for. Someone had traced every step she took for months and turned it into data. Someone she had just told she loved. Her gaze slid back to the handwritten note. Daughter of Sarah Johnson. Why? Before she could finish the thought, a shadow shifted in the doorway. Amara. She stiffened. Kai's voice. She didn't turn. Couldn't. Not yet. She stared straight ahead at her own face pinned on the wall, jaw tight enough to hurt. He stepped into the room slowly, like he was approaching a ledge. You weren't supposed to see this yet, he said softly. She laughed, a short, strangled sound. That's what you start with, it's not what it looks like. Not I can explain, just you weren't supposed to see it. He didn't answer right away. She heard the door close behind him, shutting them in with her paper life. Amara, he said again. Look at me. She finally turned. His expression was almost worse than the board. No arrogance, no smirk, no dragon. Just a man who knew he'd been caught with blood on his hands and had no idea how to wash it off. She gestured to the walls, to the folders, to the words approaching Thursday. What is this? She asked, her voice shaking. Explain it to me. Explain how any of this is different from stalking. He flinched. It's not what? She snapped. You have my schedules, my bank records, my lease, my mother's medical files. You bought my workplace before you accidentally walked into it. You tracked me for weeks and wrote approaching Thursday like you were planning a business acquisition, not ordering coffee. Her chest heaved. She jabbed a finger toward the board. You watched me while I worked, while I slept, while I walked home alone in the dark. You turned my life into a case file, a project, and then you sat at my counter and let me feel special, like the universe had finally looked up and noticed me, when really it was just you, in some upstairs office, pulling strings and scheduling fate. It wasn't like that. he said hoarsely. Then tell me what it was like, her voice rose. Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like you hunted me. The word hung in the air. Ugly and true. He inhaled slowly and didn't look away. I did. The blunt admission knocked the wind out of her. She'd expected denial, lies, some smooth justification about protection or background checks. Not this. I hunted you, he repeated quietly. Tracked you, researched you, bought the building so I could control who came near you. I did all of that. I'm not going to stand here and insult you by pretending this is normal. Then why? She demanded, tears finally spilling over. Why me? Why my mother? Why any of it? You had a whole city to obsess over, Kai. Why did you put a bullseye on my back? He looked at her like the question physically hurt. Because, he said, voice raw, your mother saved my life, and I owed her more than a bouquet on a grave. Her breath hitched. For a second, confusion cut through the anger. What are you talking about? 3 years ago, he said, eyes flicking briefly toward the folder with her mother's records. I was bleeding out on a hospital floor, no name, no ID, no one willing to get involved because they knew who I was and didn't want to end up in the middle of a gang war. Your mother found me. She treated me. She didn't ask who shot me. She didn't call the police. She just saved me because that's what she did. The words hit her like a wave, but she shoved her reaction down. This wasn't his stage. So you stalked me, she said flatly, because my mother did her job. No, his jaw tightened. Because she did more than her job. She talked to me while she stitched me up. She looked me in the eye when everyone else looked away. She told me I was still human, even when I didn't believe it. She told me. His throat worked. She told me to find something worth living for that wasn't power, to find something real. And that something was me? She demanded, randomly, out of every person in this city. It wasn't random, he said. I went to her funeral, watched from a distance because I knew I didn't deserve to stand near her grave. That's when I found out she had a daughter, you. I stayed away at first, told myself I would send money anonymously and be done with it. But then I saw you at the diner. He swallowed. You were breaking yourself to keep your life from falling apart, working doubles, skipping meals, holding everyone else together with a smile and duct tape while your own dreams rotted in a jar labeled nursing school. I couldn't. He stopped, shaking his head. I couldn't just drop cash in your mailbox and walk away. Not when the only good person who ever saw me as more than a monster had loved you enough to ruin her hands to provide for you. Amara stared at him, the edges of his confession tearing at her, even as rage tried to shove it away. So you decided to... What? She said. Take me as some kind of living IOU? Pay your debt by turning me into your obsession? No, he said, too fast. I decided to watch, to make sure you were safe, that's all. I told myself I'd sit in the corner, drink coffee, and protect you from a distance. I didn't plan... His voice broke. I didn't plan on you looking up and smiling at me like I wasn't something to be afraid of. The worst part was that a tiny, traitorous part of her believed him. It didn't matter. You still should have told me, she whispered. You should have told me you knew my mother, that you'd been there, that you'd seen me before that first night, that nothing about us was fate. It was all this. She flung her arm toward the board again, toward approaching Thursday. You took every moment that felt magical and turned it into a move on a chessboard. His eyes shone, pain and self-loathing warring in them. I know, he said. I know. I started with good intentions and ended up crossing lines I can't defend. I won't pretend this isn't twisted. I won't pretend I haven't been obsessed with you for longer than you knew my name. But, Amara, he stepped closer, stopping when she tensed. Whatever brought me into that diner, whatever made me buy that building and print your schedules, the way I feel about you now is not a plan. It's not a debt. It's not a calculation. It's the only thing in my life I didn't script. She shook her head, tears blurring everything. I don't know what to believe, she choked out. I don't know what was real, and what was you arranging the angles to make yourself look good. Were you there on the nights I had panic attacks in the walk-in? Did you plan the day you accidentally showed up during my morning shift? Did you leave those big tips because you cared, or because your spreadsheet said I was behind on rent? Both, he said, the answer tearing out of him. I cared, and I knew you were behind. I saw you counting change in your car. Stop, she whispered, covering her ears for a second. It didn't help. The room still screamed his obsession back at her. Just stop. The office felt like a shrine, like a crime scene, like proof and confession and love letter all at once. It made her want to cry and claw the walls down and run and stay and scream. She looked at the board one last time, at her whole life, laid out in ink and photos by someone who loved her so much he'd destroyed any chance of it being simple. Pure betrayal and confusion twisted together inside her, until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I used to tell myself, she said quietly, that you walking into that diner meant the universe was finally doing something nice for me. A humorless smile tugged at her mouth. Turns out it was just you, she finished. And you don't know how to do nice without turning it into a surveillance operation. His face crumpled just for a second. Amara, she stepped back, shaking her head. Too full, too raw. I need to get out of this room, she said. Before I forget what any of it felt like from my side. Because right now, all she could see were pins and papers and a love story, built on a foundation she wasn't sure she wanted to stand on anymore. The office felt like it was tilting, the floor a little less solid with every second she stayed in it. Amara turned away from the board, from the photos and the files and the horrible word, approaching Thursday, and braced her hands on the edge of the desk, just to feel something that wasn't paper and lies. Start at the beginning, she said without looking at him. All of it this time. No half-truths, no edits. Pretend I'm the judge who decides whether you walk free or rot. There was a beat of silence. Then a chair scraped softly as Kai sat, like he knew he didn't have the right to stand over her for this. 3 years ago, he said quietly, I was lying on a concrete floor in the back hallway of a hospital with a bullet in my side and no one willing to touch me. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to listen. I drove myself there, he went on. Couldn't risk an ambulance. Too many questions. I staggered in through a side entrance, bleeding through my shirt. The staff knew exactly who I was. They looked at my face, looked at the blood, and suddenly everyone forgot how to be a doctor. His mouth twisted. They were scared. I don't blame them. Helping me meant choosing a side. Amara's fingers tightened on the desk. And then, he said, a nurse walked in. Her mother's file sat open next to his hand, her name stark at the top of the page. She didn't freeze, he said. Didn't pretend she didn't see me. She swore under her breath, grabbed a cart, and started working. She called me Sir instead of Dragon, asked me where it hurt, told the others to move or get out of the way. When they hesitated, she said, he's still a person. You don't get to decide who lives based on what scares you. And they shut up and helped. It was painfully easy to picture. Her mother with her tired eyes and stubborn chin, and that one tone that made everyone in a 5-mile radius listen. She stitched me up in a supply room, Kai said. Off the books. No charts. No questions about who shot me or why. While she worked, she talked. Not small talk. Real talk. About how she was tired of seeing kids come in with bullet wounds. How she was tired of watching men bleed out over pride. How she was tired of living in a city that worshipped power and forgot about people. Amara's eyes burned. She knew who I was, he said. She never said my name, but she knew. You can't live here and not know. At one point, I told her to leave, that helping me could get her killed. She looked at me like I was an idiot and said, if I start picking and choosing who deserves to live, I'm no better than the men who put you here. That sounded exactly like something her mother would say. Too good for the world she'd been stuck in. When she was done, Kai continued, I asked her why. Why risk this? Why help me when she had a daughter to go home to? She said, his throat worked. Everyone deserves one person in their life who does the right thing just because it's right, even you. Tears slipped down Amara's cheeks before she could stop them. She told me, he said softly, You can't build a whole life out of fear and expect to die with anything but enemies at the door. Find something real, Mr. Liang. Find something that isn't about power." He looked up at her then, eyes raw. "Then she told me her shift was over," he finished. "Said she had to go home and make pancakes for her daughter, because it was their thing. And she left, just like that." Amara's knees threatened to buckle. Pancakes. Saturday mornings. Her mother flipping them in a pan, smiling even when she was exhausted. "I went back," he said. "More than once. Asked about her. Brought flowers I never gave her. The last time, a clerk told me she'd gone on medical leave." His gaze flicked to the oncology file. "I didn't know what for until I pulled her records." He didn't say the word cancer. He didn't have to. "I was in another country on business when she died," he said. "By the time I got back, the funeral was over. All I could do was stand at the edge of a cemetery and watch them bury the only person who'd looked at me like I was worth more than my worst decisions." His hands curled. "That day," he said, "I made a choice. If I couldn't repay her, I'd protect what she loved most. Her daughter. You. At first, that meant making sure no one shook down the diner you worked at. Buying the building so no rival crews could use it. Quiet things. Nothing that touched you directly." "Then you decided to walk in," Amara said hoarsely. He nodded. "I told myself I just wanted to see you once, make sure you were okay, maybe leave a ridiculous tip and disappear. And then I heard your laugh. You were scolding a drunk guy for trying to light a cigarette under the no smoking sign. You rolled your eyes at him and called him sir in the same exasperated tone your mother used on me. I was," he exhaled, "lost. So you started buggy this," she said, gesturing around. "The photos, the notes, the approaching Thursday. I started keeping track," he admitted. "When you worked, when you walked home, who sat in your section. Not because I wanted to own you, because I wanted to make sure no one else did." Her laugh came out broken. "Congratulations. You failed." He flinched like she'd slapped him. "I know this is unforgivable," he said. "I know that. If someone showed you a room like this, and it was about your mother, I'd kill them. There's no excuse for turning you into a project. I justified it to myself 1,000 ways. Debt, protection, guilt. But the truth is, I couldn't let go. And then somewhere along the way, it stopped being about her and started being about you." He stood slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement would send her fleeing. "You can hate me for how we started," he said. "You should. I orchestrated our meeting. I pushed fate until it bent around my obsession. But every Thursday after that, every conversation, every look, every night I couldn't sleep because I was thinking about whether your feet still hurt. That was real. Every time I sat in that booth and felt my chest loosen because you were alive and okay and close enough to touch, that was real. I didn't plan that. I didn't expect it. I fought it as long as I could, and I lost." Before she could respond, a slow clap broke the air. Both their heads snapped toward the door. Marcus leaned in the frame, arms crossed, expressions somewhere between amusement and contempt. "Well," he said, "if I'd known confession hour would be this entertaining, I would have sold tickets." Kai's entire body went rigid. "Get out." "Already did," Marcus said. "But then I thought, why leave her with only half the story?" His gaze slid to Amara. "You got my messages, I assume?" he said casually. "Liked the photos?" The world tilted. "You," she breathed. "You sent those." "Guilty." He didn't look remotely sorry. "Don't worry, I blurred your license plate. Old habit." Kai stepped in front of her instinctively, putting himself between her and Marcus. "You crossed a line," Marcus snorted. "You built an entire shrine to a waitress, and I crossed a line? Let's not get precious now." He pushed off the frame and walked into the room like he owned it, eyes skating over the board, the files, the words, approaching Thursday. "You know what your problem is?" he asked Kai. "You forgot who you are. The dragon doesn't pace in a diner like a lovesick teenager. The dragon doesn't build altars to girl-next-door fantasies. The dragon doesn't bring his weakness home and hand it a key." "Why?" Amara demanded, stepping around Kai before he could stop her. "Why send me those messages? Why show me this?" Marcus's gaze sharpened. "Because someone had to." He would have kept you in the dark forever if he thought it meant he could keep you. And soft men, his eyes flicked to Kai, die fast in our world. You think exposing me protects him? She shot back. You just painted a bigger target on both of us. He shrugged. Better a clear target than a blind spot. Her eyes narrowed. And Vivienne, you working with her too? Or was that just a fun coincidence? For the first time, something like guilt flashed across his face and was gone. She has plans, he said vaguely. Plans that don't involve you. I may have encouraged her to move faster. Of course you did, Kai said, voice ice cold. You see a crack and you bring a crowbar. Marcus ignored him. I warned you, he said to Kai, for months, that this, he nodded toward Amara, was going to get you killed. I told you the moment she stepped into this place, the moment you let feelings make decisions you used to make with your head, you'd stop being the man people fear and start being the man people aim at. He looked back at Amara, and for the first time, there was no mockery there, just blunt, brutal honesty. They will come for you, he said. Vivian's side, the ones on ours who think he's losing his edge, the vultures waiting for an excuse to carve up his empire. They will use you. They will hurt you if it gets them closer to him, and he will let them turn him into a monster 10 times worse than whatever you think he is now, just to keep you breathing. Something twisted low in her stomach, because she believed that. So you decided to, what? She asked. Blow everything up first? Force a choice? I decided, Marcus said, that if this was going to destroy him, better to see it coming than let it stab us in the back at a party. That's not your decision to make, Kai said softly. Marcus smiled, sharp and mean. You forfeited your right to make smart decisions the second you started writing love notes on evidence paper. For the first time since he'd walked in, Kai didn't take the bait. He just looked at Marcus with a calm that made the hair on Amara's arms stand up. Funny thing, he said, about people pointing out other men's weaknesses while they're too busy hiding their own. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Kai lifted his hands slightly, a small, almost lazy gesture. 2 men stepped into the doorway behind Marcus, big and solid in dark suits, not random guards. Men whose faces Amara had started seeing everywhere since she came upstairs. The ones who watched corners, not doors. Marcus didn't turn, but his shoulders tensed. I've known you were talking to Vivian's uncle for weeks, Kai said. Knew you were feeding him just enough to make you useful. Knew you'd use Amara to try to knock me off balance. I was waiting to see how far you'd go. Marcus's jaw clenched. If I wanted you dead, you would be. I don't doubt it, Kai said. That's why I'm not going to give you that chance. He nodded once. The men behind Marcus moved in, fast and efficient, hands closing around his arms. Marcus didn't struggle, but the look he gave Kai could have set the room on fire. So this is it, Marcus said. You're throwing away 10 years for a girl who didn't know your name a year ago? I'm ending 10 years with a man who forgot what loyalty means, Kai replied. They're related, but not the same. The guards started to move him toward the door. Marcus glanced at Amara one last time. You think you're saving him, he said. Watch which parts of him die in the process. Then he was gone, the echo of his words hanging in the air like smoke. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Amara exhaled shakily. So, internal betrayal, arranged fiancé, stalker room, and a man who thinks loving me is going to get you killed. Anything else I should know before I make the dumbest decision of my life? A corner of his mouth twitched at that, humorless and pained. I think that covers the greatest hits. She wiped her cheeks with the heel of her hand, forcing herself to stand straighter. The girl who'd clung to the counter downstairs, wanting him to make it all go away, was gone. The woman left in her place knew there was no version of this that came without blood or regret. Okay, she said. Here's what we're not going to do. His brows lifted slightly. We're not going to pretend this is a fairy tale, she said. We're not going to act like you buying my building and memorizing my schedule is romantic. It's not. It's messed up. It's broken. It's who you are. I get that now. Amara, I'm not finished. She took a step closer, close enough to see the fine tremor in his hands. You hunted me. You lied by omission. You put a target on my back and called it protection. You let me fall in love with something you curated. All of that is real, and so is this. No one has ever looked at me the way you do. No one has ever put my dreams on a wall and taken them more seriously than I did. No one has ever been willing to burn down their entire life just so I could breathe easier. His throat worked. I love you, she said, the words hurting and healing at the same time. I hate what you've done. I hate how you did it, but I love you. That's unfortunate for both of us. He let out a broken breath that might have been a laugh. So here are my terms, she said. Not requests. Terms. He straightened unconsciously, like a man about to hear sentencing. 1, I'm going to nursing school, she said. Not maybe someday, not when things calm down, now. You're going to pay for it because, frankly, you owe me, but you don't own it. That degree has my name on it, not yours. He nodded once. Done. 2, I get my own place, she continued. My lease, my keys. If you want to visit, you knock. You don't move me around like furniture, depending on where you think I'm safest. His jaw tightened at that, but he didn't argue. With security outside, he compromised. Non-negotiable. Fine, she said. They can guard the hallway. They don't get a key either. Agreed. 3, she said. And this was the one that made her stomach knot. I am not your secret. I will not be the girl you hide while you smile for photos with Vivian. If you want me, you stand in front of whoever needs to hear it, and you say so. You break that engagement publicly. You deal with the fallout. You don't shove the guilt and the bodies onto me because some woman with a blood contract told me to pick between my heart and a war. His eyes darkened. You understand what that means? Yes, she said. It means you stop letting dead men make decisions for you. It means you finally keep one promise in your life that isn't written in someone else's blood. For a second, something like fear flickered in his expression. Not fear of her. Fear of what she was asking him to become. Then he nodded slowly. I'll do it, he said. I'll call it off, in front of everyone. And 4, she said quietly, you never lie to me again. Not by omission. Not by waiting until it's convenient. If you can't tell me something because it would literally get me killed to know it, you say that. Out loud. You don't pat me on the head and tell yourself you're protecting me while you rearrange my life like it's one of your chessboards. He swallowed. And if I screw up? I walk, she said simply. No dramatic speech. No second chances. I pack my bag, I take my degree, and I disappear so deep into the world even you can't find me. The idea seemed to physically hurt him, but he didn't protest. Those are my terms, she finished. I'm not asking if you like them. I'm telling you what it costs to keep me. He stared at her for a long moment, something fierce growing in his gaze with every second. You think I won't pay it? He asked, voice rough. You think I won't burn every contract my father ever signed, every alliance I've ever made, just to stand in front of the world and say your name? I think, she said softly, that for once in your life, it's not about what you're willing to burn. It's about who you're willing to become after the fire. Something in him seemed to break and rebuild all at once. You're not my second chance, he said. You're my only chance at ever being anything other than what they made me. Her chest tightened. So what's it going to be? She asked, heart in her throat. Dragon or man? He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her room to step back. She didn't. Both, he said. For everyone else, I'll always be the dragon. For you, I will learn how to be just a man who screws up, confesses, and tries again, if you let me. She searched his face for a long moment, for any hint of manipulation or performance. All she saw was a broken boy, trying to figure out how to be better with the only tools he'd ever been given. She exhaled, a shaky sound that felt like surrender and strength at the same time. I'm staying, she said. Not because I forgive everything, not because I think love fixes monsters. I'm staying because I know exactly how bad this is, and I still want you. And because if I walk away now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been if we'd done it the hard, honest way. Relief crashed over his face so hard he had to close his eyes against it. But, Kai, she added. He opened them. One lie, she said. One more secret like this, and I'm gone. No threats, no shouting, just gone. He nodded, the movement solemn, like a vow. No more lies, he said. No more secrets. Whatever's left of me when this is done, it's yours. She stepped into him then, resting her forehead against his chest, listening to the frantic, uneven beat of his heart. His arms came up hesitantly, then tightened around her like he was afraid she'd vanish if he let go. It wasn't neat. It wasn't pure. It wasn't the kind of love story people wrote poems about. But it was real, messy, dangerous, built on ashes and bad decisions and second chances that weren't really second at all. And for the first time that day, Amara realized she wasn't choosing between safety and love. She was choosing between being a girl things happened to and a woman who drew her own lines in the blood and said, "This far, no further." She chose him, and, trembling and imperfect and terrified, he chose her back.